I was surprised to find out that the remake of Sonic Generations changed things about the cutscenes when it first came out. The first change is Sonic no longer needing to keep his hand over Amy's face to keep her away from him, and instead it has her offering him cupcakes. It's trying to portray her in a dignified way instead of keeping her true to how she was in her first game. It's prioritizing making Amy fans happy even though they're a minority in the fan base. Although they're so loud on the internet recently that makes it look like there's even more of them after Lost World stopped happening to be annoying. It gave people who are new to the series a false idea of what she's like. When I first saw this, it was out of context screenshots of it. But it turns out that both versions of the game have Amy try to hug Sonic against his will. That's a surprise. Based on the criticism, I didn't expect them to keep in anything that had her in character. It looks like they still wanted to have her be herself at this point in development, but thought him having his hand on her face was going too far because it was a humiliating joke at her expense. Something never really done in her original game. Some people must have appreciated that though. People were really fed up with Amy. If most Sonic fans are in that group, then they shouldn't have done that. Removing a joke also removes some of the comedy. And bad comedy was one of the biggest criticisms with the games written by Pontac and Graf by the people who liked the series for its original strengths and understood it. There was a bunch of kiddie, lazy, poorly written comedy that was nothing like what the series had done before, and it was the whole point of the cutscenes in what started as an action series where comedy was never the point. The series started out having its main villain trap people in killing machines meant to take over the world's governments for someone who polluted places for fun. It only looked lighthearted because of its art style. When I think of it that way, it makes sense that they got rid of this because it's just another joke. This wouldn't have looked so bad if 1. They didn't also retcon her character profile to praise her as if she's perfect, and 2. They didn't also have her offer him cupcakes, which meant they're outright trying to make her look good, when she did nothing to deserve that recently at the time Generations happened. And we've never been shown why Amy changed to be a completely different character in Sonic Forces officially. It might have been okay if it was simply removing a joke because we made our voices heard so much that we got louder on the internet than the fans of comedy. At least it was trying to address a major problem with the stories of the time overall. Of course they would respond to the criticism like this because nobody who criticized the story of the original game was saying that they wanted Amy to keep being the type of person who came on too strong. In fact, we complained about the story mocking her for that, which I'll get to later. It takes a more nuanced discussion of the story to find out if you didn't necessarily want Amy to stop being herself entirely, and just didn't want that to be her whole character and role and see her barely in the plot. Most of the criticism of Amy in Generations wouldn't have mentioned that because that's nuanced and takes longer, and Sega always overcorrects for criticism of the games. Oh right, that's not even getting into the fact that because Amy's a girl, portraying her in an artificially positive light was also seen by a few people as pandering to feminist criticisms. I don't know for sure if that was one of the reasons, so I don't want to say definitively. The series hardly ever tried to do that before. I can only think of the fact that Rouge got a different outfit in Heroes. And that just made her look even more sexualized, so if they were trying to pander to feminism, they had no idea how. Because the game was made in Japan. Some people want girlfriends from there because they think they're going to be submissive. And this is a series with Elise in it. They don't care that much. The way Amy was sanitized in Lost World and onwards was far more likely to have been done at least primarily to address the criticism that she was annoying, which wasn't necessarily a feminist criticism. Sega's been pandering to its fans' criticism since the backlash from '06. The reason Shadow the Hedgehog was made was because some fans sent letters asking for Sonic to have a gun. The people who just assumed Amy was only whitewashed for feminists knew nothing about the series. One of them even called Rouge Rogue, and Metal Sonic Mecha Sonic. There's a really big Amy fan on social media who said that if you're a feminist, he hopes you hurt yourself in an unspeakable place with a cactus. Being an Amy fan doesn't make you a feminist. In fact, he's such a game purist that he hates how she's written in the comics, where most of the time she was just a harmless action girl, because he hates any alternate interpretation in Archie, so that would include that. Being a fan of Amy the way she was actually portrayed in the games requires you to not agree with the feminist criticism of her. This is a minor problem. It's annoying that the remake always says who's talking in the subtitles at the start of a line. It's a waste of time to read. Almost no one benefited from it, and it makes it harder for me to compare the two sets of cutscenes because the lines don't look identical, but I don't want to talk about the name being in the subtitles every time. When Sonic's friends get kidnapped, instead of just saying, "Not cool," which is an underwhelming reaction that implies that he doesn't really care about them, he says, "Those are my friends," which is more natural. This is just like if people redid the cutscene from Lost World, and when Eggman dropped some animals from high up in the sky, Tails no longer said, "That's harsh." This is actually in character for Sonic to say. I can't imagine why someone would be opposed to this, unless he thinks it makes him weak to care about people and call them his friends. Which Eggman would also think, so he'd have to be an asshole, because it's prioritizing strength and power over morality. In the remake, Tails doesn't say he was floating without a body in a black limbo. He says he didn't know where he was. So the original line was considered too dark. So this was censorship for sure. And it's misaimed because this is already a series where all the main characters' friends got kidnapped for no reason by a scary monster. And even the fact that the hub world has places turned white arbitrarily would be creepy to a kid. At least that change meant he suffered less. The next change has the same things to say about it. He doesn't say he's gonna have nightmares for weeks. It did make him look cowardly when he said that in the original, which is out of character for the person who followed Sonic everywhere in the classic games. If someone really wanted to be thorough about criticizing every aspect of the original cutscenes, that must have been pointed out. In the remake, Sonic says Tails is safe now and that's what's important. The original version had him be silent instead of comforting after he got told Tails was gonna have nightmares for weeks after a scary experience. It made it look like he didn't actually care about Tails. Or at least was such a jerk he cared more about not looking weak by talking compassionately and showing that he cared, even for his best friend. Even though he's a hero, and he was reassuring to Chip about his amnesia. So that's out of character. It made him look emotionally stunted. And that's something that game purists want him to be. That's why they demonize Sonic getting more emotional and Archie has a relatable reaction to how serious things got, because he really cares about his loved ones. This is only going to get complained about by people who want the heroes of stories to care more about being macho than being good people, even though they're heroes. This is such an inoffensive line, I doubt anyone watching this minded it. If you see the main hero being a good friend that's a goody two-shoes, that only says something bad about you. Might as well just say do-gooders as an insult. The only people I could imagine would hate this are just dicks. Everyone wanted him to have a better friendship with Tails. It's just having their dynamic be how we actually imagine it to be. In most of the games, they don't even come off like friends, more like cops who deal with Eggman as a job, only talking about exposition about what the villains have been up to and their plan about how to stop him. How is that worth preserving? We're supposed to like and care about these characters. Games where they don't have a close friendship never got me to care about them. In the remake, Sonic actually recognizes Green Hill. And Tails says the name of the island it was on. Everyone complained about the original having them somehow not recognize Green Hill Zone, even after all of the times Tails had been there. This is one of the things that was made fun of in Sonic Generations in minutes. In the remake, Sonic says that's as good a lead as any, instead of that might be a good place to check out. So I guess it's not as good because it's saying it's a lead, but downplaying how good it is. I don't know why the remake still has Tails barely recognize Chemical Plant Zone. He was only 3 when he went there, because he's 8 now, and 8 minus 5 is 3, So it makes sense if you think about it. But most people would just be annoyed like I was because they expect him to remember it more strongly because he was there. And it was his first adventure. You'd think it'd be the most memorable one. The same logic for having Sonic remember Green Hill applies to Tails knowing for sure what chemical plant is. The only way this makes sense, other than the writer being a complete moron, is that it wasn't changed because either Flynn or the one in charge of him knew Tails was only 3 in Sonic 2. I know Sega tried to make people think the characters don't have official ages anymore. My first reaction was, this proves they aren't invested in the story of Sonic at all and don't care one bit about it. Because it'd be impossible for the characters to be ageless. And what kind of writers wouldn't even care enough to have official ages for their own characters? Recently I realized the only people who would like this enough to defend it would be the ones who benefit from getting to say that these underage characters are ageless. And those are the kinds of people who would look at not safe for work fan art of them. With Japan's track record, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for them to pander to them. My point is, maybe the people at Sega don't actually think the characters are ageless, and are saying that for other reasons. They're certainly not defending it because it's the decision Sega made. You just know that if Sega decided to make Sonic a pink elephant out of nowhere, they would be complaining about that. So nobody thinks literally any decision Sega makes is a good one. In the remake, when Tails is in chemical plants, he actually does say its name, and is confident that's what it is. And even remembers the name of the island it's on. In a vacuum, this is awesome for fixing the problem with the original game, where in an anniversary title, they didn't remember being in the place they'd been to. In context, it only makes it more frustrating that all he said earlier was that the skyline was familiar. Anyone who would complain about this because they're tired of references just don't remember how annoying the original cutscene was for not doing this. I bet a new generation of fans who didn't start with the original would have no idea that this fixed something wrong with the original game. Sonic showing that he cares about his friends is way better than saying, "Duh, this place is giving me deja vu all over again," which is redundant, so it sounds stupid. Amy still flirts with classic Sonic. She says she always thought he was cute, and now he's cuter. The way the remake was criticized, I didn't expect her to still flirt with him. She's still in character. In the original, it made a complete fool out of her by having her ask what's the secret to looking younger, as if he would know that. I mean, to be fair, it's a fantasy world, so it's plausible that he could have run into a magic ball that turned him younger. In both versions, she still doesn't immediately ask, "Who are you?" She still thinks it's just modern Sonic. It's not 100% making her too positively portrayed. In the original game, everyone complained about her saying she thought she'd never be able to flirt with him again, because she would never say that, and it was mocking the character too much. And it was more forced comedy from Pontac and Graf. Of course they removed it. She'd only say that as a self-deprecating joke, but she's never been known to make jokes insulting herself. She'd have to have a big ego to think she had a chance with Sonic. If you really hated Amy, I understand hating the change. I think everyone aside from the ones who defend everything the games do thought this was a cringy line. It tried to pander to the ones who were sick of Amy wrong. I don't think this is a bad change because regardless of how stupid a character is in universe, it's still bad writing to have him or her be possibly stupid, and to be completely out of character. But the remake still has her think classic Sonic as Sonic. It even still has both Sonics do these animations that make fun of her. It still made a complete fool out of her. Just changing that line was the laziest amount of effort. Why didn't he go further? With the criticism I heard of Amy in the remake, I expected there to be no jokes at her expense. If this was pandering, it'd be the most half-hearted attempt. If modern Sonic saves her, what she says in the remake is that she'll return the favor if he ever needs saving, instead of saying she was afraid she might never get to flirt with him again. It's made her more dignified than she deserved at the time by making her talk in a way that reminded the people who want her to be like the comics of her competence in them. It just causes an eye roll if you don't trust Sega to have her write it so that Amy would save Sonic, because she's usually a useless joke. So we have no reason to think this is foreshadowing instead of hollow pandering. If you want to please the fans, actually animate her saving Sonic. Have her do stuff. In the remake, Knuckles still just says thanks to classic Sonic, which means he still thinks he's not a separate Sonic. And now he doesn't even question the fact that to him, modern Sonic looks different. It'd be in bad faith to say he didn't notice a difference, because that's impossible. He just didn't want to be rude. But he's been consistently rude to him the entire series, especially recently. So that's out of character. My problem with the scene from the original was always that it made Knuckles look stupid because we knew he was wrong. Not that he was fat-shaming. Something that only Sonic did, but we were never told he wouldn't do it. We've still got the same problem in both scenes anyways. Another reason for the change could be that it's disrespectful to the legacy of the series to insult the appearance of classic Sonic. In an anniversary game at that. If Sega was behind the change, that'd be the reason. It's Sega of Japan. They're not progressive enough to be against body shaming. They're not even progressive enough to be aware that there's a marketable amount of people against it. And I don't see any gay characters in the games. All Knuckles does in the remake is ask where his island went. And of course, the fact that the animator didn't bother in moving the animation of him rubbing his stomach made people joke that he ate it. It makes no sense in universe, but it did make people laugh because they joked about it. So it actually worked better as comedy than the original cutscene. Hopefully that's why it was left in. Why does Knuckles only talk like he never needed help in the modern Sonic cutscene? He thought he was modern Sonic both times. So now it doesn't make any sense that he said something different in this one. He wants to get back at the time meter, which makes it forced that he won't do that at the end of the game. And Sonic encourages him, which is more in character than remaining silent like the original, where he was like classic Sonic, with his rival. He had no reason to insult him. The other times he called him Knucklehead, it was for a reason. And it was cheesy that he gave him a thumbs up only after he was done talking. The original had Eggman threatened to close your eyes forever. It was an extremely cringe-worthy line that reeked of censorship. The remake replaces the line and does a much better job. Did anyone really like the original line? There was no way someone sadistic enough to put animals and robots would have held himself back like that. I don't see the point of us being able to see classic Eggman being taken away by the time meter in the remake. It doesn't make sense that he wouldn't be hidden by the purple light. Why is Sonic's reaction to seeing another version of himself to say that he couldn't have done it better himself? First, he would think he could do it better because he's got more abilities and is confident. And his reaction was more natural in the original. He talks like he just beat a boss fight even though it was Classic who did that, and he didn't tell him how. So he has no reason to think he could have done it better. It's better that Classic Tails says, older versions of us, because in the original he said doubles, when they don't look exactly like them. In the remake, Sonic's confused that they could travel through time without the time stones. It's a nice reference. He would be reminded of Sonic CD. The only change with Cream's cutscenes is that in the remake, she doesn't say she's scared of the dark specifically, which gives more dignity to the character. The original version of the classic Sonic cutscene has Rouge say that classic Sonic looks nothing like any Sonic she ever saw before. The remake has her think he's modern Sonic but looks different. What did she get made to look stupid? The original actually captured the fact that she's smart from the previous games. She's supposed to be smarter than Knuckles. After the criticism people had of the way she looks in the remake, I thought I'd be able to notice the difference. I was expecting her cleavage to be way more noticeable in the original after that. If it weren't for me seeing screenshots comparing the two, I never would have talked about this. You really have to be staring at nothing but her boobs the entire time she's on screen to notice the difference, even though she's a bat. It's so bad to change it, because it upset the people who cared, And anyone who might have wanted the change still won't be happy because it still didn't get rid of her eyeshadow or change her outfit or voice. So she's still sexualized. She's still gonna remind people of escorts anyways. Unless you rob her of all of her feminine aspects. Which would suck too, because it'd ignore what she used to be like, and those traits are still appealing to people. The only reason they wouldn't do that is that they didn't actually support censoring her. Maybe it was just the animator's idea. They also covered up more of her back apparently. But she was never sexy in the first place. Maybe I'm wrong because I never got the appeal of boobs, but didn't most people just think it was weird that they were trying to present a fat lady as someone you'd want to kiss? That's why she didn't appear in the movie. Sally looks more like a human because of her hair, so that's more relatable to admire. Rouge just has fur. I have a hard time believing anybody but furries actually cared about this, for any reason other than its censorship to pander to feminists. If any of the same people complaining about the remake aren't calling out the movie for censoring her out of it, then those people never knew this franchise and were just trying to make money off trashing the remake. Because if you knew about SA2 and the movie, you'd know she was left out of the movie. And what other reason could there possibly be than her looks for why she was left out of it? So that makes a lot more sense to complain about. Wouldn't it be a lot more insulting if Rouge was censored out of this game entirely? That's the only way they could have really avoided making people uncomfortable with her. The remake has Sonic call her a gem for no apparent reason, being more respectful of her. So the scene's better because it's praising Rouge, and people like Rouge. It seems like Flynn's ship-teasing them by having Sonic flirt with her. It would be far more likely that character would be straight than not, and they do have a lot in common in personality because they're both cheerful, gutsy anti-heroes who tease people and don't always let the rules restrict them, and they've both gone after jewels. Meanwhile, she never got along with Knuckles and wants to steal Emerald. Oh yeah, and Sonic also doesn't tend to get along with Knuckles. So the only real problem I can think of is that we were never told or shown why Sonic's nice to her now. I think every other time he saw her, he just took her seriously like she was a bad person or didn't even acknowledge her presence. Maybe he was friendly with her in battle, but that's it. And if battle was canon, Gemma wouldn't have been left out of the game. It wouldn't be in character for him not to go with Cream to Sonic's birthday party. The same logic behind saying it's bad to have someone cool flirt with a pretty girl he has a shot with, like cool guys do, applies to every character. If the game's not showing Sonic be attracted to anyone makes him asexual, then to be consistent, you have to say every Sonic character is asexual, and what are the chances of that? I haven't seen anyone be that ridiculous. In the remake, I hate that Tails says "aw" at the end of that sentence. Why did he do that? That's what you'd expect from a weird mistranslation. He says the time meter is consuming the dimensional energy, and that's what causes places to turn white. That does a better job of explaining to me what happens than the original. Dimensional energy is just magical like that, so that's why being consumed does that, and being run through makes things go back to normal. Why didn't they get rid of the "or there won't be a tomorrow" line? That was so cringeworthy. The remake's changes to Espio's lines aren't a big deal either. When he said in the original that he looked into the soul of the time meter and saw only darkness, that was so lame. So at least they changed it to something slightly less try-hard and desperately trying to be deep. In the original he bragged by saying that only someone really dangerous could trap a ninja. And I can't take him seriously because I was never told or shown why it would be hard to trap him based on anything about him in particular. When he was visible when he was being kidnapped. Because it was just as easy for him as it was for everyone else because all the Time Eater had to do is make a portal nearby to suck him up. I'm glad that was gotten rid of then because that made him look silly. I kinda like that in the remake. Green Hill doesn't just pop in, taking me out of the story. Not like anyone could have been invested in the story to begin with. The things that happen in the cutscenes are so forgettable, I felt like I was experiencing some of them for the first time. I didn't remember that Emerald kept away the Time Meter out of nowhere all by itself, when it didn't do that to Shadow. or perfect chaos? What was the point of even keeping this cutscene in the game? In the remake, it said that Sonic's speed would bring back the power of that whited out emerald. In the original, he's more vague. The only real difference with the Blaze cutscenes, the Vector ones, and the Charmy ones is that in the remake, Sonic cares enough to say something in response instead of being like classic Sonic. He takes his enemies seriously instead of being delusional about what a threat he is, which makes me take him seriously. In the Charmy cutscene, modern Sonic tells Charmy to simmer down, which is them saying what the audience was thinking, and he is supposed to have an attitude. Eggman said I recalibrated everything in the remake instead of saying he can't believe he lost. He usually doesn't use big words, especially when he doesn't have to. But him saying that actually justifies why he's so surprised that he lost to Sonic. So he looks less stupid than the original. So this is better. While it's in character for him to think he'll win every time, it's better for him to have multiple reasons for why he thinks this time would be different. I like that Sonic calls him Egghead, because it's more effort on the part of the writer and Sonic than not doing that. And it makes sense to use that pun. In the original, the line, "It's like it's our job or something," was cringeworthy and lame, and made the world building worse because if Sonic's not getting given money as a reward from the government every time he beats Eggman, then how does he pay for his food and stuff? We were never told that Tails sells inventions to make the money for him and Sonic to live, so while that makes sense, it's not canon. Logically, it would be his job, and it's already his job metaphorically. So why did he say it's only like? So I'm glad the line got fixed to something cool instead of some lame meta-humor. Again, this is the kind of out-of-place comedy that all of the adventure fans and actual classic fans complained about with the original. So it would be really weird if someone like that didn't appreciate this just because you can interpret it as censorship. To game purists, it would be censorship, because they think literally everything about the games is perfect. So at first they did demonize all of the changes, only to backpedal and call the remake perfect too, because the remake is a game too. In the original, Tails just asks what Eggman's doing here. In the remake, he considers calling another truce with him so they could team up against the Time Meter because it's the bigger threat. It takes advantage of him being a genius. Another reason it makes sense he'd say that is that they teamed up with Eggman before. And classic Tails saying that Eggman being kidnapped means this is getting serious is way better than the original, where he said this is getting stranger all the time. Which sounded so silly I couldn't take it seriously. It sounded like bad translation. I actually prefer the original where Sonic said Eggman would avoid an embarrassing beatdown if he gave up now. It feels like they neutered his attitude here by giving him a more tame hero line. But I understand the change, because fans were complaining about Eggman being portrayed as pathetic in the Colors era, and that line reminded people of that. They didn't have to go this far though. It's still good to have Sonic make fun of him, because that's in character and that's their dynamic. It's good that he told him to restore the timeline though, because him just giving up wouldn't be good enough. In the original, Tails saw Eggman controlling the Time Meter and asked, but how? Even though he could figure out pretty easily that an engineering genius would be able to do it. In the remake, he says, no wonder, which is more respectful to his character. I don't know what he's saying no wonder about though. Why the fuck did Flynn keep in the response, nobody calls me Robotnik anymore? Instead of Eggman dismissing the damage he does to the world because he'll own the world, which doesn't refute what Tails said, Eggman just says in the remake that he'll just erase the timeline to reshape it anyways, which actually is a good comeback. This is more respectful instead of portraying him as having gone insane. Cutting out his coughing would have also been respectful. This isn't the right time to have comedy at his expense, when he's actually done something really competent, and is at its most threatening. So he makes more sense, but the writer doesn't fully care about portraying him with dignity. It's really not like Flynn to make characters make more sense instead of having them do and say things that make no sense. so it only makes sense to give the credit to whoever's in charge of him. Instead of classic Eggman asking if he'll really get that crazy, he says that they call him eccentric, which is the same insult, but not as bad. It still doesn't fix the problem. There's still no way classic Eggman would have done the same thing. Why are we expected to believe he got even more controlling and evil over time? Modern Eggman stopped being sadistic enough to put animals and badniks since heroes, aside from a few exceptions, so he's actually gotten less evil. The only reason they would try to establish that he's more evil is out of disrespect for classic Eggman, out of arrogance with what they're doing now. Thank God I got rid of "You and what mustache?" That was such a cringy line. I like that they got rid of the line, "You got this, Sonic." They figured out the voice actor would probably sound bad if he said it because of the reception to it last time. Him saying something more aloof but still encouraging is more in character. They got rid of Knuckles getting slammed into the tree, which is more respectful, but still doesn't solve the problem of disrespecting him because Amy still shoved him. Ironically, even though people said the remake pandered to feminists, this change did the opposite. You'd think it'd be the remake that would ever be strong enough to shove him into a tree. You could argue that's censorship because it's more dark to have him get hit into the tree, but we were all tired of him being made a joke out of. You'd only be okay with him being disrespected if you have no respect for the character. And the remake gets rid of Tails getting asked where Sonic puts his rings. Logically, you would have already known that rings turn into energy and go into your body, because that's the thing about how a thing as common and fundamental as rings work. It'd be like not knowing how water works. He went on adventures with Sonic, he saw him collect rings, so he would know where he puts them, and that they disappear into him. So while the reason that's rumored for the change is lame, and Sega really should just stop, it makes more sense. Instead, classic Tails just wonders if things will go back to normal. Sonic had better dialogue in the remake where he said "fast track," because it was saying slang. Why did classic Tails no longer calls Portal home our ride? Just because he's the smart kid, you get rid of his slang because that's less nerdy. It's erasing his history. Classic Tails wasn't just the smart guy. Sonic 2 Tails showed almost no signs of that. Most of the time he was just like Sonic, apparently. This is cliché and anti-intellectual, sanding down the nuance to his character. This applies to the original too. It shouldn't have literally just had him be the exposition fairy except an optional mission. If Classic Tails was in character, he would have followed Classic Sonic in all of his levels. The remake could have fixed that. It also could have fixed that awkward moment where the two Robotniks were arguing, but we didn't hear them say anything. Well, I turned out to agree with the most iconic complaints about the changes. Most of the changes just fixed the problems that all of the fans complained about originally, that only the Color Zero fanboys were okay with originally. It still wasn't completely fixed. So the people in charge don't fully understand everything wrong and just fix the most vocal criticisms. It's not censorship if it's objectively improving the story for most people. By that logic, a remake getting rid of Elise kissing Sonic or Baldy McNosehair would be censorship, but most people wouldn't say that made it bad. The remake doesn't get rid of that dorky moment where Classic spins around just to thumbs up someone. I thought it was supposed to be cool. There's a lot of flaws with the story I resisted talking about because I probably already mentioned them in my Let's Play. Both versions, the main impression I get from these cutscenes is cringe. I felt embarrassed just watching these cutscenes. Also, if they were gonna change things, there's really no excuse for keeping classic Eggman's sunglasses light blue, let alone keeping classic Sonic's spines that lame shade of light blue. Both of those colors were dark blue in the classic games, and they looked a lot better there. I always find it cringeworthy looking at these two. Sega Japan really has no idea what made the series so successful back then. That's why classic Sonic is portrayed as Mickey Mouse still. As Mario. No attitude with no smirking whatsoever. Even though that's literally what saved the series. Well, it didn't do well in Japan because it didn't market that. The remake was an opportunity to give classic Sonic some dialogue, which is another thing some of the actual fans complained about, because I actually remember that Sonic still talked in the classic days. Not only did he say yeah in CD, he had dialogue in 3D Blast. The only reason they're getting all the classic stuff wrong is because its success was owed to Americans, and now Sega Japan is entirely in charge of the series. The feeling I got after watching all the remake's cutscenes for the first time was that I think most of the changes are good.